Now that we've addressed the setting and plot of the Big O, I would like to get to something I stated were more important than both of these: the characters. Big O is a character story, and for that reason I would like to give several of the main characters their own videos, dissecting them and analyzing why they're just so important to this show as a whole, why they make it as good as it is. To start, I'd like to start with the character of Schwartzwald. Although not the main character in the show, in fact only appearing or being mentioned in about a third of the episodes of the series, Schwartzwald is the one that stuck with me the most, and as such is the one I would like to speak of first. His character is one of obsession, one of passion, yet also one of isolation and delusion, spite and fury, yet wisdom, and some kind of twisted love, or at least respect for humanity. Schwartzwald is the character which opens the eyes of the viewer, and the characters of the show, to a wider questioning of everything. Now, just as a disclaimer before I get into the analysis of his character, and any other character analysis for that purpose, I'd like to say that the word truth will get thrown around quite a lot here, and I'd like to explain what I mean by this. When I say truths, I mean anything on a wide spectrum. It can be the main reason for existing. It can be something factually true. It is something that someone holds to dearly and that they see as important. It can be interpreted in a literal sense. For example, if you owe someone $5, it's true that you owe them $5. And it can be true in a metaphysical, more abstract sense. Take for instance the idea of the truth of existence, like God, or higher powers. As stated earlier, the Big O has a kind of nebulous take on the truth. In the show, it's blatantly stated near the end, in fact, that there are many truths, and we must all seek our own. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. First, we need to understand Schwartzwald's place in the plot. Schwartzwald first appears in episode 4, and is introduced as an obsessive reporter who Paradigm wants to fire because of obsessive quests for the truth. What he obsesses over is the truth of what happened 40 years ago, and that makes Paradigm Corporation very uncomfortable. They don't want him sniffing around any sensitive issues and rattling the masses. Anyways, in his first appearance, Schwartzwald leads Roger to the underground model city, proceeds to wake up Archetype, a prototype Big, and then sets himself on fire. His next appearance is in episode 12, when he is revealed to be alive and now with Big Duo, the Flying Big. Together, they seek to destroy out the Paradigm Corporation and inspire the people to think by scaring them into doing it. In his attempt to do so, however, he wrecks a good part of the dome, sets multiple bystanders on fire, and causes massive property damage. As such, Roger has to stop him with Big O, because they simply seek to protect the city, and is causing a great amount of harm to it in his quest to spread the truth. Next, Schwartzwald appears in episode 17, where he gives the famous Leviathan speech, one of my favorite anime speeches of all time. In this speech, he pleads with the people to think, saying that if they don't, they will simply apathetically await extinction and death. They will stagnate and die. And, as such, it is his duty to scare them into thinking if they won't do so themselves. Finally, Schwartzwald makes an appearance in spectral form in episode 24. Here, he proceeds over the condemnation of Alan Gabriel, who has taken over Big Duo. Other than these episodes, Schwartzwald of course has various cameos and references made to him throughout the series. Usually in many anime set in the future, that's just it. The show is, well, set in the future. Some world building is done and everyone, characters and viewer, accept this and get on with the plot. Schwartzwald is the first to hint that the world itself in Big O is a lie, however, that the foundational truths are either non-existent or twisted, that the viewer and the characters cannot simply take things at face value. He is the spark which lights the flame of curiosity, asking, is everything how it seems? Who controls what? Who are we? And his constant questioning eventually drives Roger and the viewer to question the status quo and eventually form their own perceptions of and views in response to these. In his words, he forces them to evolve and think. But what is evolution in his eyes, and why do people need to do it? For Schwartzwald, the answer is obvious. Evolution is knowing and learning. People need to evolve because not doing so is stagnation. And stagnation soon turns into devolving, which soon slides into weakening. And all weak creatures are wiped out and eventually die. For a man of such drive, the idea that others lack a drive like his and cannot harness similar thoughts is incomprehensible. All people are roughly equal and capable of every thought he has conjured, so why can't they embrace his thoughts? If they are capable of reasoning, and Schwartzwald bases his conclusions on reasoning, even if they're based on his own unconventional reasoning, then why can't others come to the same conclusion? It would seem to Schwartzwald that they should, and since they don't, He figures that they're stagnating, and therefore dying, barely even human at this point. He loathes the decadence people have sunken into, which has blinded them from seeking the truth. As to him, the truth should be sought above all else in his eyes, and not doing so, in fact doing anything else, is stagnating, which, as mentioned earlier, is one step above death. For this reason, he must restore humanity back to the masses, first, by simply attempting to inform them, and later into scaring them into thinking. Since in his eyes, thinking will save humanity, any means to get them to think is justified, and as a result, he doesn't tend to hold individual lives in the highest regard, and gets more violent over time. This twisted view of humanity, in turn, serves to fuel Schwartzwald's delusional quest to enlighten the masses and himself. Someone must save the species, and if he's the only one that's qualified to do so, well, it must be him. His quest for truth and spreading it have tangled with his obsessive and Darwinist views, creating a man who loves humanity for its potential, but seems to loathe it for its failure to meet said potential. This contrast explains both how he can try to rally and save the people with the dynamic Leviathan speech, yet also constantly cites humans as pitiful and resorts to heinous violence to spread his message. The message, of course, being to think. This conflicted view extends even to himself. Schwartzwald is many things, but it cannot be said he does not apply his own views to himself. He truly believes what he preaches, and as such he constantly pushes himself to think. Think how to find the truth. Think of what that truth may be. Think of how to disseminate that truth. Think of how to awaken the masses. While he does not hold the safety of the common man in high regard, he doesn't hold his own that much higher either, as noted by his various exposures to flames, giant robot fights, and other hazards of the job. Over time, his quest for truth itself evolves, going from seeking a simple timeline to seeking to understand his place in the world and the agents and powers of God controlled by man, i.e. the bigs. As such, his views take on a sort of pseudo-religious tone, as, if Big Duo has some sort of divine or pseudo-divine presence, and it is accepted Schwartzwald as his pilot, that means Schwartzwald now also has some kind of bizarre divine presence. For this reason, the definition of truth to him becomes slightly more nebulous, though still quite restrictive. For example, he has accepted that there is more to the world than a simple timeline and humanity, but he still doesn't care about the abundant small truths, like the love families have for each other, or simple human interaction. He seems to hold that the universe is some kind of cold and infinite presence, and that humans need to think in order to survive it. He has become some kind of twisted apostle, a man on a mission to understand this nebulous higher power any way possible and tell the masses of it, or at least inspire them to think about it for their own sake. This image of a twisted apostle is what I find most fascinating about his character. He is a sort of broken inverse to the idea of a conventional prophet. Where a prophet tells of God, Schwartzwald tells of the idea that there's some kind of higher thing, maybe. Where a prophet is sought out by a god they know of, Schwartzwald tries to seek out a god he doesn't even know exists. Where a prophet tries to give masses help through preaching, Schwartzwald tries to help himself by preaching to the masses. Where a prophet tells people truths, Schwartzwald says that the people need to help him find the truths. Both, though, hint that there are deeper meanings to life, of higher powers, and that people need to rise to the occasion. I think that the most telling proof for the idea that Schwartzwald is some kind of heretical prophet analogy is oddly enough in the original soundtrack of all places. His theme is called Stoning, and I think this is appropriate for his character. Heretics are stoned. Heretics are someone who question established doctrine. Heretics are someone who then try to establish their own doctrine and questioning of established doctrine to the masses. And, in a land where amnesia is the accepted norm, someone who longs exclusively for memories of the past is heretical. That is not to say that his search for the truth in and of itself is wrong, even if his methods are. Every view is heretical to some other view when we think about it, and it just so happens that Schwartzwald's views are heretical to the views of Paradigm City. It just so happens that Schwartzwald has a different set of views, and he wants to shift the perspectives of the people. He wants to convince them that the search for truth is good, and that we should all do it. I do not think it coincidence that he has a flame motif, in fact. Flame serves to illuminate and cleanse, yet it is also extremely destructive and hard to control. This fits his character perfectly. On one hand, he's obsessed with enlightening the masses and cleansing them of decadence and ignorance. Yet on the other hand, the methods he uses are extremely dangerous, to everyone including himself, and he's obviously not completely in control of himself or his actions. What is the truth, however, though? And how does Schwartzwald's quest for it impact him? As discussed earlier, the answer that Big O gives to this question is that there are many truths, and many can be present at the same time. Some are big and some are small. and it's up to us to see which ones we want to. In fact, this is clearly stated by Roger. This is a view which contradicts Schwartzwald's, however, and can be seen as a critical character flaw. His search for the greatest truth has blinded him to the myriad of truths around him, and as a result, he has become pig-headed and develops a sort of savior complex. He is trying to open his eyes so wide to the greater picture that it's blinded him to many things around him. It means he's blind to the pain he's causing to others. He's blind to the fact that his methods aren't the most morally upstanding. He's blind to the pain he's causing himself. While prophets are appointed by God and given sight, Schwarzwald has attempted to crown himself a prophet, and in turn has lost his own sight, the sight of those around him and of himself. He has cut off his family, forsaken his home, and become a pariah. Also, he can find the truth, and in turn lost the true love of those around him, and his sight of the many small truths that make our lives enjoyable. He has become consumed by his work and obsessive tendencies. He has discarded everything he has known, all to try and learn things which he may never know. While prophets know God and everything that there is cannot fully be comprehended, the heretical one here is consumed in trying to prove otherwise. Ironically, while Schwarzwald says people need to think in order to avoid death, he himself has effectively killed who he was via obsessive thought. Schwarzwald's drive for knowledge does not mean he has a god complex, however. In fact, I would say it means the opposite. Schwarzwald wants to know the truth so he can be closer to fulfilling the part of everyone that longs for certainty, to fulfill his assigned role of informing the masses. Even if the truth that he seeks is not bluntly expressed as a god, Schwarzwald holds it as some kind of nebulous higher power not to be trifled with. He doesn't necessarily seem to be a religious type, but he does know that humans are not the highest power, and whatever is above them must be respected and revered. This is proven in two key interactions. First, it is shown by the fact that Big Duo, whom he acknowledges as some sort of higher power, as the power of God controlled by man, respects him, and even tries to carry out Schwarzwald's mission after Schwarzwald is forced out in episode 12. Second, in episode 24, Big Duo flies up after condemning Alan Gabriel, and flies high enough to finally let Schwarzwald see the big picture, that the Big O universe is simply some kind of production. This is some kind of divine or karmic reward, it would seem, for Schwarzwald knowing his place, and attempting, even if in an extremely twisted manner, to help enlighten his fellow man. This final reveal of the truth of Paradigm to Schwarzwald even seems to give him some kind of twisted closure, as he now knows the truth, it seems. Schwarzwald appoints himself as a prophet so he can experience or familiarize himself with the higher power, whatever that power may be. In his eyes, he expresses it simply as the truth. Again, that's not to say it is a definite God, or that there is a concrete doctrine that he seeks to follow, or even worship. He does know, however, that he is human, and that people need to know their place in the universe, whatever that universe may be, and whatever powers above them may be. He doesn't define what they are, he simply knows that they exist, and hints that they should be respected. He does not seek to play God. This reference, in turn, reflects upon a notion of the show, and that is that people need some kind of higher context to their lives, be it religion or mythology or history or even extended family and tribal ties. People need some sort of greater context to frame their lives in order to fulfill the part of them which craves certainty, that craves answers. For Schwarzwald, this higher notion is truth, even if it is a somewhat vague and nebulous notion of it, and that is why he seeks it. I would also say that it is why Big Duo deems him not guilty. It recognizes that Schwarzwald doesn't necessarily seek to serve himself, but seeks to serve a higher power of sorts. Seeks to somehow enlighten the masses and serve the greater good by informing them of whatever that truth may be. I also think this is why Big Duo allows him to pilot it. It's also why Schwarzwald proceeds over the condemnation of Alan Gabriel, as the views of the two are almost completely inverse. Schwarzwald shuns himself in the material world to seek the truth, while Alan Gabriel shuns the truth to seek the material world and himself. One wants to do everything he can do to find the truth, while the other wants to do everything he can do to impose his own nihilistic truth. In the end, all the actions of the heretical prophet were to find the truth, and, in some twisted way, he was true to himself the whole time.